When Cult of the Lamb was first revealed at Gamescom 2021, players were understandably excited. Not only have roguelites and roguelites exponentially grown in popularity in recent years, but it makes a fantastic first impression because of its unique graphical style, sense of humor, and fun premise. The game's structure undeniably fits within the roguelite genre well, but its cult management systems take up a much larger portion of its gameplay than many players may expect. This is far from a negative, however, and is instead one of its greatest strengths. I'll go into more detail about all of these elements later on in this video, but suffice it to say right now that while Cult of the Lamb is not the most hardcore roguelite released in recent years, it is definitely one of the most fun and unique. Before getting into the game proper, I want to touch on what you should expect from the game's performance and other technical aspects. I played on a PC with a GeForce 2090 RTX graphics card, and the game ran beautifully. Cult of the Lamb's stylized graphics lend themselves excellently to maintaining a robust frame rate even on the highest settings, with almost constant particle effects, special effects, and crowds of enemies on the screen at one time. The developers at Massive Monster also made sure to include a full suite of graphical options to fine-tune it to your machine's hardware. There's just about every modern graphical option available, which is always great to see. When first booting up Cult of the Lamb on PC, you'll be greeted with a message recommending that you play with a controller. I heeded this message at first, but wanted to see just how well the game performed when playing it with a mouse and keyboard. While playing with the controller felt great, so did playing with a mouse and keyboard. I think that either option works perfectly well, and the options menu has a robust key binding menu to tailor things to your own preferences. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the story that acts as the game's foundation. It should come as no surprise to you that in Cult of the Lamb you play a lamb with a cult. Before you get to that point though, you're treated to an opening cutscene that has you control the lamb on its way to being sacrificially slaughtered. The slaughtering is being carried out by 4 horrifying ancient gods, known as the 4 Barons. Before you are killed, they revealed that you are the last lamb in the world, because they systematically hunted down and killed every other one to prevent a prophecy from coming true. That prophecy relates to an even more ancient and powerful god known as the One Who Waits, and after their convenient exposition dump is wrapped up, you're stabbed and killed. But death is not the end. As you slip into the afterlife, you are brought to face with the One Who Waits. They tell you that they were betrayed and imprisoned by the 4 bishops by 4 divine chains many years ago. The One Who Waits then tells you that they are naming you as their champion. You will no longer die, but instead will be returned to life with the new purpose of raising a cult to kill the 4 bishops and release the One Who Waits back onto the world. With that, you are dumped back into the forest where you were killed, and are led by a previous chosen of the One Who Waits, who helps you escape the hostile woods and find a space to build your own cult camp. The rest of the game then revolves around you building up your cult, and embarking on crusades into the 4 realms of the Barons to weaken their own cults, and ultimately kill them in the service of your new patron deity. As you do so, you'll explore and learn about the world, peeling back its layers as you meet new characters, learn the backstories of the Barons' betrayal, and carve out your own place within it. It is a brutal world filled with death and violence, but is undercut by an adorable whimsy that gives it a fun charm as well. Continuing on, we need to look at the visual and audio design of the game. To start, the game is just gorgeous. The stylized graphics carry a lot of personality that makes the game instantly recognizable. It is quirky and cute, yet filled with occult symbols, extra-dimensional tentacles, and gory details that make it all captivating to look at. The graphics also do a fantastic job of giving character to the different areas that players explore during Crusades. Each one has great visuals for the area surrounding the combat arenas, from the skeletons of giant spiders to huge mushrooms, weeping trees, and coral structures. There's also a lot of flares mixed into the combat actions and curse powers that players use during combat. Those, alongside enemy models and the visuals of their attacks, can make things very chaotic in larger combat encounters. However, Cult of the Lamb does a great job at preventing the visuals from blocking important information. Enemies flash white as they prepare to attack, and damaging objects are brightly colored so that they stand out against the typically dark backgrounds. The soundtrack and audio effects are equally solid. The music bounces back and forth between dramatic and weighty to underline the cosmic horror aspects of the game's story, and whimsical, cheery tunes present at the player's cult camp. The voice acting also does a lot to give personality to the characters and lines, even though the voice lines are just gibberish. But now we can get into the 2 main pillars of Cult of the Lamb. We'll start with looking at the Crusades, or roguelite dungeon crawls. Every crusade starts with picking one of 4 regions to go crusading in. Each one is associated with one of the Barons, and is home to their followers and an associated cast of enemies. Before you can face the Baron of each region, however, you have to first complete 3 runs in the region to kill boss monsters. Each run is a randomized procession of rooms, but your path through them is pretty linear. There are some rooms that split off from the main path, but it is very rare to see them split off into their own line of rooms. Instead, they tend to be little more than a side area that you clear and then return to the main path. Each run is also defined by the weapon and curse power that players start with. These are randomized, but there isn't as much variation here as you may be used to when it comes to other roguelites. Rather than dozens of options, there are a few types for both your weapon and your curse. For weapons, there's the dagger, sword, hammer, or axe, and each are defined by different effects unlocked through the cult management system. These have benefits like a chance to poison hit enemies, a chance to steal health from enemies when you kill them, or just incredibly boosted damage numbers. Each class of weapon and type of curse behaves differently. Daggers are extremely fast, axes are slow, swords are in the middle, and hammers are so slow that when you click to attack, a target appears on the ground and it takes a second or two to actually slam the ground. Once you've got your starting gear, you can proceed through the run's first floor. The first floor is always a combat one that sees you exploring a small web of randomized rooms. Most of these rooms are simple combat encounters, but there are also extras. Each one always comes with a room that allows the player to pick from 2 tarot cards that act as buffs to improve their performance for the remainder of the run. These can be collected through various activities across the game, allowing them to randomly pop up in future runs. These tarot cards are a fun way to mix up runs, and there is a good range of effects that they have for you to react and adapt to during your Crusades. Other random rooms that you can come across include healing rooms, NPCs that you can then find in the overworld, and ones that allow you to switch your loadout around for better gear. Most of the rooms will revolve around combat encounters, however, so let's take a look at that. Combat in Cult of the Lamb is pretty simple. Players can left click to attack with their weapon, right click to use their curse, and dodge roll to avoid damage. Each region also has a handful of enemies for players to come across, but each one has unique attacks and mechanics to adapt to in different combinations with one another. Altogether, the combat in Cult of the Lamb is on the simple side, but that is hardly a negative. While I definitely love complex mechanical systems, the combat here is so well tuned that it is extremely balanced and responsive enough to be a ton of fun to play. Once you get through the first combat floor, you are presented with a web of rooms that make multiple paths to the boss you are trying to kill at the end of your crusade. These rooms are also randomized, and many of them involve no combat at all. The icons of the rooms also indicate what the player can expect from them, allowing them to make strategic decisions about where to go. These rooms can contain resources for building at your camp, give you the opportunity to heal up, reward you with new cultists that can then be indoctrinated into your cult, or give challenges from the one who waits that tempt you with rewards for avoiding any damage during a certain number of combat encounters. Rooms can also be combat floors similar to the one at the start of the run, and the final room with the boss at the end is always a combat floor. The randomness of the Crusade webs keeps runs feeling fresh, and gives players the ability to go for what they need most, which adds a lot of strategy. Defeating more bosses in the region increases the length of the runs there, however they never get terribly long. I played on the highest difficulty and an average successful crusade only took around 10 minutes. However, once you've defeated all 4 bosses in a region, you'll be able to go on infinite runs in the region that only end when you want them to. But to get there, you'll have to chop your way through some bosses. So let's talk about those. The bosses are all massive monstrosities that are themed around their region. They all have a number of attacks that see the boss fights ranging from dodge-heavy brawls to bullet hell-like sequences. The variety in these fights is really great at making each one feel unique and exciting, and keeping you on your toes. You'll never know exactly what to expect from the boss fights, so you have to react on the fly according to the build you've made throughout your crusade. Speaking of builds, you shouldn't expect anything too complicated here. The builds in Cult of the Lamb are much simpler than other roguelites such as Hades or Dead Cells. You'll only get a few opportunities to change up your equipment throughout your crusade, and the tarot cards mostly buff different aspects of your character, rather than unlocking interesting synergies or defining your entire playstyle. Now let's look at the second pillar, Cult of the Lamb's cult management gameplay. As you go through the game, you slowly grow a bustling cult at your camp. But running a cult isn't easy, so you'll have to devote a lot of time to managing it. This all starts with getting new cultists. Cultists can be found during crusades, are earned by killing bosses, or are purchased from a creepy giant spider that lives in the woods. Once you have freed a cultist, they are teleported back to your camp where you can then indoctrinate them. This allows you to change their name, customize their appearance with numerous heads, change their color, and then give them a primary task. Managing your cultists is the main drive of your cult. Every cultist comes with some passive traits that impact when they gain or lose faith in you. They each have an age that steadily increases over time, they have hunger that needs to be satisfied every single day, and they can even fall sick. The more cultists you have following you, the stronger your cult, and thus yourself, will become. But this takes a lot of resources. First, you'll have to have your cultists gather wood and stone to actually build things. Then you'll have to build places to sleep for each of your cultists so that they are comfortable at night. Then you'll also need to feed them with recipes that you have to create from food items like berries, cauliflower, or fish. Cooking is extremely easy, but you do have to do it every day, so finding a steady supply of food is paramount. To do this, you could spend your free time outside of Crusades fishing, or set up a farm that your cultists can manage for you for while you're away after you get some upgrades. But then you also have to keep your cultists healthy. To do this, you have to clean up their poop every time you come back from a crusade, but that can thankfully be used as fertilizer for your farms. Eventually, you can build outhouses for them to use, but you'll pick up a countless amount of poop first. Finally, you need to manage the faith of your cultists. This impacts numerous systems. First, your cultists without any primary task will pray at a shrine, giving you devotion, which is spent on a research tree of structures that can then be built in your camp when they're unlocked. Second, you'll have to manage the overall faith of your cult. If it gets too low, cultists will grow unhappy and can eventually leave or start denouncing you to their peers. Of course, if that happens, you just throw them in jail and brainwash them back into submission. Or, you could just sacrifice them. That's right, you can also sacrifice any cultist you want to the one who waits. This is a part of your cult's temple. At the temple, you can give a sermon every day, which boosts the faith of your cultists and gives you a currency used to unlock new clusters of weapons and curses that have a chance to appear during your crusades. In the temple, you can also declare doctrines. These are split into 5 types, and each type has 4 tiers. For each tier that you complete, you get to pick between 2 doctrines. These can have effects like unlocking new rituals, changing the personalities of your cultists, or giving you an improved version of a structure in your camp. Finally, there are the rituals. Rituals each have a cooldown, preventing them from being spammed, and they require the bones of enemies that you've killed during your crusades to be performed. They all have numerous effects, like the aforementioned sacrificing. Each ritual has its own costs and benefits. At the cost of some faith, you can make your followers fast to prove their devotion, saving you from having to worry about food for 3 in-game days. Or you can marry a follower to make sure they stay as loyal to you as possible. Much of the cult management section of Cult of the Lamb revolves around an in-game clock that is always moving. Even during crusades, your cultists are continuing to work on things and act of their own accord, meaning that whenever you wrap up a crusade, you have to return to your camp to keep everyone fed, build new structures, repair broken beds, and hold your daily sermon. These breaks provide a really nice change of pace from the frenetic action of the Crusades. There are even various minigames that you can enjoy in your downtime, like fishing, playing knucklebones, or straight up gambling. While I doubt that every player will enjoy the simple management sim aspects of the game, players such as myself that enjoy the genre will find a lot of accessible fun to love here, especially as things get more complicated and your cultists start dying of old age or are afflicted with plagues from the barons. There are numerous other small elements that play into managing your cult. You can build decorations, complete quests for your cultists, and unlock new outfits that carry different effects to change how you play. There are a ton of disparate elements for players to toy around with outside of Crusades, and they all are worth your time, although you don't have to engage with any that don't interest you. Overall, Cult of the Lamb is a wonderfully balanced experience that is a lot of fun to go through. Once I picked it up, I had an incredibly hard time putting it down. I do suspect that some may not want to pay the game's cost for its approximately 12 hours of playtime for a single playthrough. However, I've always preferred a really great 10 hours of gameplay over 100 hours of something worse. I really can't recommend Cult of the Lamb enough. So even if its limited amount of content isn't enough for you, I still recommend throwing it on your wishlist and picking it up when it's on sale. I don't think you'll regret it. Thanks for checking out our review of Cult of the Lamb. If you played the game yourself, leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to catch our future gaming reviews.